You think you can just run through here like you own it? Get out of my neighborhood!
Step
He's
back.
trespassing! You hear me? Go back where you came
Sir,
from!
back up now. Hands
I'm
to
just
yourself.
running, officer. I'm good. I got it. Stay
This
right
is
there.
bull.
At 8:14 a.m., Gary Vance was a wealthy manager with a perfect credit score. By 8:18 a.m., he was a broke criminal facing 5 years in federal prison. He lost his entire future because he said one specific word to the wrong man. Stick around to watch this arrogant bully destroy his own life in 4 minutes. Do you think wealthy neighborhoods should have private security patrols to prevent outsiders from entering? Gary Vance certainly thought so as he slammed on the brakes of his massive black SUV. The screeching tires left black marks on the pavement right in front of the jogger. This was not an accident, but a deliberate attempt to intimidate the man running. The runner stopped immediately, his chest rising and falling rhythmically as he checked his pulse. He did not look frightened, which was the first thing that confused the angry driver. Gary Vance stepped out of his vehicle, his face already turning red with aggressive rage. He slammed the car door shut with a force that echoed through the quiet street. The jogger remained perfectly still, watching the driver with eyes that seemed to analyze everything. Vance expected fear, but he was met with a cold, clinical, and terrifying indifference. This silence should have been a warning, but Vance was too blind to see it. He marched across the asphalt, invading the personal space of the man on the sidewalk. Most people would have backed away, but the runner stood his ground, like a statue. Vance pointed a shaking finger at the man's face and began his loud interrogation. "What are you doing in this neighborhood, looking into people's houses and checking cars?" Vance screamed these accusations without a single shred of proof or any prior observation. The runner simply looked at the finger pointing at him and then back at Vance. He did not open his mouth to defend himself or to offer an explanation. This lack of engagement infuriated Vance more than any insult could have possibly done. He wanted a fight, but he was fighting a ghost who refused to engage. "I asked you a question, boy, and you better answer me right now." Vance's voice cracked with the intensity of his entitlement and his lack of control. The runner adjusted his smartwatch, tapping the screen to pause his workout timer. It was a dismissive gesture that signaled he considered Vance beneath his notice or concern. Vance took a step closer, clenching his fists as if preparing for physical violence. "You think you can just ignore me like I don't live here?" The runner finally made eye contact, his expression unreadable but intensely sharp and focused. He still did not speak, letting the silence stretch until it became physically uncomfortable. Vance looked around, hoping neighbors were watching him protect their street from this intruder. But the only witness to his meltdown was the silent man in the tracksuit. Vance decided then that he needed to escalate the situation to get a reaction. He reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone with a dramatic flourish. "I am calling the police, and I will have you arrested for trespassing." Vance announced his plan loudly, hoping the threat would finally break the man's composure. The runner gave a slight nod, almost as if he was approving the decision. This reaction was not what Vance expected, but he was too committed to stop. He dialed 911, his fingers trembling with adrenaline and a sense of righteous power. "Yes, I need an officer at 4500 Northside Drive immediately. I am being threatened." The lie rolled off his tongue with practiced ease, painting himself as the victim. The runner raised an eyebrow but remained rooted to the spot, arms crossed loosely. Vance continued his performance for the dispatcher, adding details that were completely fabricated. "He is aggressive. He lunged at me, and I think he might be armed." This was the point where a simple misunderstanding turned into a felony crime. The runner knew exactly what law was being broken, but he said nothing. Vance hung up the phone with a smug grin, believing he had already won. "They are 5 minutes away, so don't you dare think about running away." The runner checked his watch again, noting the time with a calm precision. He had no intention of running. In fact, he was waiting for them. Vance leaned against his SUV, crossing his arms to mirror the man he targeted. The air between them was thick with tension, heavy with unsaid words and threats. Vance began to pace back and forth, unable to match the runner's stillness. "You picked the wrong day and the wrong street to act tough, pal." Every word Vance spoke was being filed away in the runner's memory for later. The runner shifted his weight slightly, looking down the road where sirens wailed. He knew the police response time in this district was under 4 minutes. Vance mistook the glance for nervousness and laughed a short, cruel, barking laugh. "Oh, now you are scared because you know the law is coming for you." It was ironic because the law was indeed coming, but not for the runner. The runner's face remained a mask of discipline, hiding his identity and his power. He was testing Vance, giving him every opportunity to walk away and save himself. But a man like Gary Vance never walks away when he thinks he has power. The sound of sirens grew louder, cutting through the morning birdsongs and breeze. "I hope you have a good lawyer," Vance sneered, projecting his own future needs. The runner almost smiled at that, but he held it back with effort. The blue lights flashed against the trees, signaling the arrival of the first unit. Vance straightened up, fixing his polo shirt to look like a respectable citizen. A patrol car screeched to a halt behind Vance's SUV. Lights blindingly bright. Officer Daniels, a young rookie, stepped out with his hand resting near his holster. He saw exactly what Vance wanted him to see: a wealthy resident and a suspect. The visual bias was instant and powerful, shaping the officer's perception of the threat. Vance immediately walked toward the officer, hands open, claiming the narrative before it started. "Officer, thank God you're here. This guy's crazy and won't leave." Daniels looked at the runner, who was sweating and standing silently on the sidewalk. The visual contrast between the two men did the heavy lifting for Vance's lies. Daniels felt the pressure to act decisively in front of a taxpayer in Buckhead. He pointed at the runner, his voice booming with authority he hadn't earned. "Sir, stay right where you are and keep your hands where I can see them." The runner slowly raised his hands to chest height, palms open and non-threatening. He did not argue. He did not scream. He simply complied with the safety order. Vance stood behind the officer, wearing a smirk that screamed of victory and malice. "Check his pockets. I bet he has stolen jewelry or drugs on him." Vance was directing the police officer as if he were his private security guard. Daniels was nervous, his eyes darting between the calm suspect and the angry homeowner. He took a step toward the runner, his hand unbuttoning the strap of his holster. "I told you to keep your hands up. Do not make any sudden moves." The runner's movement had been zero, but the officer was reacting to the tension. Vance shouted again. "He threatened to kill me, officer. Put him in cuffs now." This allegation raised the stakes to a lethal level, forcing the officer's hand. Daniels couldn't ignore a death threat, even if it was a complete fabrication. He pulled his taser, pointing the yellow plastic weapon at the runner's chest. "Get on the ground, face down, hands behind your back. Do it now." The runner did not drop to his knees. Instead, he stood taller and firmer. This defiance shocked the officer, who was used to fear or immediate compliance. "I am not going to ask you again. Get on the ground right now," Vance cheered from the sidelines. "Yeah, take him down. Show him who is boss." The runner locked eyes with Officer Daniels, his gaze piercing through the young man's confidence. He was calculating the risk, the angles, and the legal implications of this moment. He knew that getting on the ground would be a humiliation he couldn't accept. "I am complying with your visual search, officer, but I will not lie down." The runner's voice was deep, calm, and articulate, surprising the rookie cop completely. It was the voice of a man who gave orders, not one who took them. Daniels hesitated, the taser wavering slightly in his gripping, sweating hand. "Sir, that is a lawful order. If you resist, I will have to deploy." Vance saw the hesitation and panicked, fearing he was losing control of the situation. "Don't let him talk to you like that. He is a criminal," Vance yelled. The runner ignored Vance and kept his focus entirely on the nervous police officer. "Officer, articulate the reasonable suspicion you have that I have committed a crime." The legal terminology hit Officer Daniels like a physical blow to the face. Suspects did not ask for reasonable suspicion before they were even in handcuffs. Daniels stammered, "You match the description given by the caller of a suspicious person." The runner nodded slowly. "And what criminal activity did the caller describe specifically?" Daniels didn't have an answer because the call had been vague and emotional. The officer lowered the taser slightly, confusion replacing the adrenaline in his system. Vance could see the tide turning, and he felt his power slipping away fast. He decided to throw more gasoline on the fire to force the officer's hand. Vance stepped around the patrol car, closing the distance to the runner aggressively. "He is resisting arrest. Officer, stop being a coward and do your job." This insult to the officer was a tactical error, but Vance was too angry. Daniels looked back at Vance. "Sir, step back. Let me handle this investigation." Vance refused to back down, his face purple with the effort of screaming. "I pay your salary. You work for me. Now arrest this piece of trash." The racial coding in his language was becoming more explicit with every sentence. The runner remained silent again, letting Vance hang himself with his own words. Vance assumed the cavalry had arrived to reinforce his authority, but he was wrong. The second cruiser skidded to a halt, blocking the street in a tactical position. Sergeant Miller stepped out, his hand resting instinctively on his radio to control the frequency. He did not look at the homeowner, but focused entirely on the weapon in the rookie's hand. Vance misinterpreted this focus as support and shouted a triumphant welcome to the new officer. Finally, a real officer who knows how to handle these kinds of dangerous people. This statement would later be played back in court as evidence of his discriminatory intent. Miller ignored the shouting man, squinting against the sun to see the suspect clearly. He was trying to process the impossible image of a familiar face standing at gunpoint. Why was a federal judge standing on a sidewalk in his sector on a Saturday? The recognition hit him like a physical punch to the gut, stopping his breath cold. He had testified before this man just 3 days ago in a high-profile case. Officer Daniels saw his supervisor's face pale and felt a surge of absolute panic. "Sarge, this subject is refusing to identify and is resisting my lawful commands." Miller didn't hear the rookie because the blood was rushing loudly in his ears. He knew that one wrong move now would end both of their careers instantly. Vance saw the hesitation and decided he needed to push the officers to act. He marched past the stunned sergeant, closing the distance to the silent runner aggressively. "Don't just stand there staring. Put the cuffs on him before he attacks us." The runner watched Vance approach, his face remaining a mask of absolute, terrifying calm. He knew that any movement now would give them an excuse, so he remained frozen. Miller finally snapped out of his shock and lunged forward to intercept the civilian. "Sir, step back immediately and lower your voice. Do not approach the subject." Vance was insulted by this order, believing his status gave him immunity from commands. "You work for me, I pay your salary, and I want him arrested." This classic line is usually the moment where a police interaction goes from bad to worse. Miller grabbed Vance's arm to stop him, but Vance shook him off with force. "Get your hands off me. I am the victim here. Can't you see that?" By touching a police officer in anger, Vance had just committed his first verifiable felony. The runner's eyes flickered to the body camera, ensuring the assault was captured clearly. Vance was now past the point of no return, fueled by adrenaline and blind rage. He pointed a shaking finger at the runner, screaming words that would end his life. I am tired of people like you coming here and ruining our safe community." The specific slurs he used next were not just offensive. They were legal dynamite. He didn't just insult the man, he described him using terms that defined a hate crime. The silence that followed his outburst was heavy, broken only by the hum of traffic. Officer Daniels looked at Vance with wide eyes, finally realizing he was protecting the wrong man. Miller stepped in front of Vance, his face hard with professional anger and disgust. "That is enough, sir. You're making a disturbance and obstructing a police investigation." Vance laughed, a sound that was manic and disconnected from the reality of his situation. "I am the investigation. I called you here to take out the trash." The runner finally broke his silence, his voice cutting through the noise like a blade. "Officer, is your camera recording audio of this individual's statements for the record?" Miller turned to the runner, his posture shifting from aggressive to submissive in an instant. "Yes, sir, everything is being recorded and will be preserved for evidence," Miller answered. Vance looked between them, confused by the sudden change in the power dynamic. "Why are you answering him? He is a nobody. He is just a suspect." Miller looked at Vance with a mixture of pity and contempt for his ignorance. "Sir, the man you are screaming at is Federal District Judge Marcus Thorne." The name hung in the air, heavier than the humidity, waiting for Vance to understand. Vance blinked, his brain refusing to process the information that contradicted his worldview. "Judge? No, look at him. He can't be a judge. He's just a—" He trailed off, the slur dying in his throat as the reality crashed down. The runner, Judge Thorne, slowly lowered his hands, looking directly into Vance's soul. "I am a federal judge, and you have just committed a hate crime." Vance's face turned a pale shade of gray as the blood left his head. "No, that's impossible. You're lying to protect him because he's one of you." He was still digging, trying to find a conspiracy to explain his massive error. Miller didn't waste another second listening to the man who had endangered his career. He grabbed Vance's wrist, twisting it behind his back with practiced, forceful efficiency. "Gary Vance, you are under arrest for disorderly conduct and assault on an officer." Vance squealed in pain and shock. "You can't arrest me. I live here." The click of the handcuffs was the most satisfying sound the morning had produced yet. Judge Thorne watched the arrest with the same impassive expression he wore on the bench. "Add the hate crime enhancement to the charges, Sergeant, based on his statements." Miller nodded respectfully. "Yes, Your Honor, it will be in the report." Daniels, the rookie, holstered his taser, looking like he wanted to disappear into the asphalt. As they walked him to the car, Vance began to beg, his pride gone. "Wait, please, I didn't mean it. I was just stressed from work." The excuses poured out of him, pathetic attempts to reverse the flow of time. "I can apologize. We can settle this right now. I have money." Judge Thorne stepped forward, closing the distance to the patrol car window. "You cannot buy your way out of a federal hate crime charge, Mr. Vance." Vance looked at the man he had tormented, seeing the authority he had ignored. "Please, Judge, I have a family. Don't ruin my life over a mistake." Thorne leaned in, his voice low and cold. "You ruined your own life." Miller slammed the car door, sealing Vance inside a cage of his own making. The muffled screams of the former manager could still be heard through the glass. Daniels approached the judge, his hands shaking as he took out his notepad. "Your Honor, I apologize. I didn't know who you were," he stammered. Thorne looked at the rookie, offering a lesson instead of the reprimand he expected. "Officer, you shouldn't need to know my title to treat me with basic dignity." The words hit harder than any disciplinary action, shaming the officer into silence. "Ensure that video footage is uploaded immediately. I will be subpoenaing it by noon." Thorne checked his watch again, restarting his workout timer as if nothing happened. But something had happened. A legal machine had been activated that would crush Gary Vance. The police cars drove away, leaving the street quiet again, but the damage was done. By the time Vance was booked, the video was already being flagged for review. The district attorney saw the name Judge Thorne and authorized the highest possible charges immediately. Vance was denied bail at his first hearing, deemed a danger to the community. He spent the weekend in a holding cell, wearing orange instead of his polo. The Bodycam footage leaked online within 48 hours, spreading like a digital wildfire globally. Millions of people watched Gary Vance scream racial slurs at a calm, stoic federal judge. The internet detectives found his employer within minutes and flooded their phone lines with complaints. His company released a statement firing him before the sun set on Monday evening. "We have zero tolerance for hate speech, and Mr. Vance has been terminated." He lost his $250,000 salary while sitting in a cell waiting for his lawyer. His wife saw the video on the news and contacted a divorce attorney immediately. She didn't want her children associated with the man who had become a national villain. The social ostracization was total. His friends blocked his number and deleted his photos. The country club where he played golf revoked his membership for conduct unbecoming. The criminal trial was swift, brutal, and entirely one-sided due to the video evidence. Vance's lawyer tried to argue temporary insanity, but the jury wasn't buying it. They saw a bully who thought he was above the law and acted accordingly. The prosecutor played the video of Vance poking the judge's face in slow motion. This was not stress. This was a calculated attempt to terrorize a citizen. Judge Thorne testified calmly, his words carrying the weight of the entire justice system. He described the fear he felt, not for himself, but for the system's failure. Vance sat at the defense table, weeping silently as his life was dissected publicly. The jury deliberated for less than an hour before returning with a guilty verdict, convicted on all counts, including the hate crime enhancement that doubled his sentence exposure. The sentencing hearing was the final nail in the coffin of Gary Vance's life. The presiding judge looked at Vance with disdain, ready to make an example. "You weaponized the police force against an innocent man because of your prejudice." Vance tried to read a prepared apology, but it sounded hollow and self-serving. "I am sorry I got caught," was the subtext everyone in the courtroom heard clearly. The judge sentenced him to 5 years in federal prison, no possibility of parole. The gasp from Vance's family was the only sound in the packed courtroom. He was led away in handcuffs, looking back at the life he had thrown away. But the punishment wasn't over yet. The civil system was waiting its turn. Judge Thorne had filed a civil suit for defamation, emotional distress, and rights violations. The civil trial was a massacre of Vance's remaining assets and financial future. Thorne's lawyers went after everything: the house, the cars, the retirement accounts. They argued that Vance's actions were malicious and intended to destroy Thorne's reputation. The jury agreed, awarding punitive damages designed to hurt Vance for the rest of his life. The final judgment was $4.2 million, a sum Vance could never hope to pay. His massive house in Buckhead was seized and sold at auction to pay the debt. His luxury SUV, the weapon he used to start the fight, was repossessed. He declared bankruptcy, but the judgment for intentional torts could not be discharged. He would spend the rest of his life working to pay a man he hated. 3 years later, Marcus Thorne is still running that same route every Saturday morning. He passes the house where Vance used to live, which now belongs to a nice family. Sometimes he thinks about the man who tried to stop him that summer day. It is a reminder that status is not visible and arrogance is a dangerous blinder. Gary Vance is currently working in the prison laundry, earning 12 cents an hour. He has plenty of time to think about the moment he decided to get out of his car. He learned the hard way that justice is blind, but it has excellent hearing, and in the end, the gavel didn't just drop, it crushed him completely.